Welcome back to Nate the Hate, where we are live on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Joining me today is, as always, MVG.
What's up, Nate? Great to be here.
It's always great to have you. And today we're going to talk about the Summer Game Fest, or the Eternal E3. And we brought on the man of the hour, Jeffrey Grubb from VentureBeat. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, it's a privilege to have you join us. And we're going to jump right into the topic of the Eternal E3 of the summer of 2020. What is your take on this prolongated form of announcements, Jeff?
I'm hesitant to commit to like any one take at this point, but I mean, up to now, my feelings have been kind of stressed out and not liking it so much. I am someone who grew up on E3, and then I've been going to it for the last 7 years, I think, at least the last 7 years, and I got really into the flow of let's get ready to do a week of nonstop reporting and nonstop covering games. It might expand a little bit out in each direction, where some events might happen the weekend before or even the week before. But mostly stuff's going to happen in this very siloed experience, where it's like if you're there, you're gonna go hands on with quite a lot of stuff, and if you miss stuff, it's like, well, it was a crazy week. It's okay to miss stuff. Taking all of the stuff that would have happened inside of E3 and then just throwing a bomb on it and having it explode over the entire summer is not great for me. I feel like something's always about to happen. There's always going to be another story that's going to drop any moment now, and I should be ready for it. And then when a whole day goes by and nothing really happens, it's like, oh man, I just kind of wasted the whole day thinking that something E3 related was going to come down, and it didn't. And it's a bummer. I think I just need to like deconstruct the way I thought about E3 before and really approach this from a new way. But maybe that's a me problem and not necessarily a problem with this whole thing. I don't know. It seems like some people are liking it. How are you guys feeling?
Well, I agree. I completely agree with you. I think that it's kind of just a bit of a shit show all around, that these kind of smaller mini announcements, pretty much every week until between now and the end of the summer, it doesn't really feel the same. It's not the same. And from your perspective, Jeff, I mean, you're trying to make sense of all this, and you've got your timeline of things, which is literally changing every single day. I mean, it must be frustrating for you, but I mean, for me, it kind of makes me wonder, was E3 really that bad? Because, it got really a raw deal, especially at the end of last year with the doxing stuff, and people were questioning its relevancy anymore, whether it was really worth these big publishers spending, tens of millions of dollars actually mounting a keynote speech at E3. So, but now that it's not here this year and we've got this instead, it makes you wonder, was E3 really that bad?
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, there was bad parts of E3. I think the people that run E3 still don't know what they're doing, obviously. The evidence is this summer. This wouldn't have gone down like this if there was competent leadership at the ESA for that. But, with that said, I still think that the E3 product itself was fine for what it was trying to do. And a lot of the arguments you hear from people are that, like, okay, why would I announce my game, or why would a company announce their game that could get overrun by all these other announcements in the middle of E3? And I think that's fair. But I mean, we are seeing the opposite now. We're seeing, like, okay, your game gets a whole day. And I mean, like the Mafia trilogy thing, I don't know if the reaction would have been all that different had it happened at E3. And honestly, there might have been more eyes on it. Like today, it's like the trailers came out, and I'm only half paying attention because it's like, oh, well, we already know about that. I guess it's not that big a deal. So they've already sort of spent their bullet there. I don't think that the idea that, oh, games can own an entire news cycle all on their own is true for most games still. Yeah, there are a few games that can do that, a few companies that can do that, but most games are still just going to get buried under regular day of news, and it's no different. But at E3, though, if you're all competing and you're all part of that big conversation, I still think that there's a greater potential at the real E3 week. But I don't know.
Because, like, I'll stay with the Mafia example, is that it drops today. The news came out, we saw the trailer, the release schedule for it came out. Like, you get Mafia 2 and 3 today, you get Mafia 1 in August. Now, had they shadow dropped 2 and 3 at an E3 presentation, it would have been, a really hyped moment. Today, it feels a little subdued, maybe because of the timing of when it happened and the fact that people are now accustomed to, well, this is how the day started. Does that mean something bigger is going to come later in the day? So now you're kind of anticipating something else to happen instead of just focusing on Mafia. Whereas at E3, you know it's a kind of that roller coaster. Something else is going to come, but you have that excitement. And now we're just in that weird limbo of, is that it today? Is more to come? Is something better tomorrow? What are we actually waiting on? And that's, I guess from a fan's perspective, that's exciting. From an industry professional perspective, it's exhausting because it's, when does my workday actually begin and when does it end? Is there going to be a surprise announcement?
Don't you think that it's also going to be exhausting for the fans too? Like when they keep thinking everything is Batman and nothing's been Batman so far, like it happens over and over. And I think it's going to be exhausting.
Well, actually,
they're always going to expect something huge to happen. And then, oh, the announcement today was just, a new SpongeBob game and some will be excited. And then they'll be like, oh, tomorrow will be Batman. Like, no, it was a new Hamtaro game. And then eventually fans are going to get frustrated with the situation because you're going to sit there saying, why is Sony silent? Why is Microsoft silent? Why hasn't Nintendo done anything yet? Why are we just getting these small fry third-party games? And I guess the answer to that is those smaller third-party games, they were probably announcing these games on these dates regardless of E3 2020 happening or not.
Right.
Mm. So I got a really hard-hitting question, Jeff. The June 2nd Mel Gibson picture, as someone who was born and raised in Australia, it can only mean one thing. It's Tequila Sunrise, the video game, right? Am I close?
You got it. Someone finally got it right. Absolutely.
I knew it.
There's some people have got it actually in like the mentions on Twitter and elsewhere and on Reddit and stuff when I've been like seeing what people are saying. Some people have guessed it. So it's out there if people want to dig, but people have guessed every possible thing, so I don't think it can help you too much.
Yeah, they went through the IMDb list. That's what I did actually before this interview. I just picked out a cheesy Mel Gibson movie.
That's pretty smart right there. Yeah, absolutely. I think people are like thinking, people who don't know that picture just means like motion picture like that are like, is there a photo? Like, should I be searching Google images of Mel Gibson to see what comes up? I'm like, okay, you do that. Knock yourself out. But yeah.
So
that one's still happening. So people can have that to look forward to. Maybe set your expectations to like 5 out of 10. I think that's always a good place to put them for that. So people don't get too crazy.
Just like most Mel Gibson movies, 5 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's fair.
There was a new Mel Gibson trailer that dropped today. As excited as you are for that, maybe a tiny bit more excited for this. Yeah.
So you're a very popular person right now. Your name is everywhere on my timeline. So what possessed you to try to make sense of all this mess of the Summer Games Fest and come up with this list of literally like 22 dates on a piece of paper?
Yeah. We talked a little bit about it. It was stressing me out, and I was trying to make sense of it for myself. And as part of that, like you do some reporting as a reporter. Like I'm going to do some reporting. So there are some dates that everyone knows, and there's some dates that early on there were some embargo dates that I could kind of put on there. And some of those were the hidden ones. Like I didn't like do reporting to get Tony Hawk or whatever. That was an embargo, and I was trying to be very, very. I put blank man for that because everyone was saying Batman for that. So I'm like, okay, this will be a good joke, kind of trolling people a little bit, but it's also not a lie because Tony Hawk is Birdman. And I was like, okay, so once I kind of do all this reporting and get us information here, this is starting to put stuff, it's starting to congeal this whole thing for me a little bit better. And I'm feeling a little bit better about it now that I have it all in front of me. And I can't be the only one feeling this way. I know a lot of people are like worried about, what's Nintendo doing? Like, they haven't had a real direct in a long time. What can I put out there that it could help, reassure people? And part of it is like the way that GameSpot, IGN, and Jeff Keighley are kind of handling this, where Jeff will be like, oh, I got a thing tomorrow morning. And then IGN, without acknowledging Jeff, will be like, we have a thing tomorrow morning. And people are like, oh, it's at the same time. Is that the same thing? And it's like, yes, I know it is. It's the Epic thing. That's happening tomorrow. This is kind of getting ridiculous that the way that these different media organizations, which they have every right to do what they're doing, but it's ridiculous in that it's, they were supposed to be the ones that were centralizing this. That was the whole pitch. Like, we are going to bring all these companies together and we're going to do that. We're going to be like, Jeff Keighley was going to be the traffic cop for all this. And it doesn't feel that way. Instead, it just feels like them hyping up their brand, which again, that they're allowed to do that. But it was bothering me So I'm like, you know what? I'm not a media organization. I'm not a company that's trying to get people to watch my big shows. I'm just going to be a reporter here. Let's gather up as much information as I can and then share what I can in one place so people can just feel better about this. And it's worked out well so far. I think that it's accomplished that to a certain degree for some people. Now, as things have changed with things are still fluid. Like, I'm trying to give people an idea of what the future is like for things that haven't been officially announced. And the reason they're not announced is because they haven't necessarily decided exactly how things are going to go. So when things change with Sony, people are like, oh, you don't even know what you're talking about in the first place. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to try to convince you that I do, but I'm just trying to help you here. So, but it's worked out for the most part. It's really accomplished what I set out to accomplish.
Yeah, and that's the risk with any type of rumor reporting, is that when you get specific, like the date, June 4th for the Sony event, that was legitimate until Sony decided to change it.
Yeah.
That date was, that was chiseled in stone as of, late last week. That's something I had heard myself. And, Sony's changing it because, as you said, the industry right now, everything is very fluid with all of these situations. Even the Microsoft event earlier this month, it was originally scheduled for May 5th. They changed it to May 7th, only a few days, prior. So when you get specific with the dates, you're always going to have that vocal group who comes out and says, well, see, you're wrong. You're changing it now because you don't know the date anymore. Like, well, because the date has changed. It doesn't make my original reporting inaccurate. It's just, at the time I reported it, it was accurate.
Yeah, that's why you write it the way I write it. Like, the Sony's current plan right now is for June 4th. And that's why, I write it that way, because that's the accurate statement that I know to be true. That is their plan. And, when things change, I try to, update it, make sure everyone, has as much transparency as I can give them. But, I think if people think about this a little bit, they'll understand why this stuff is changing. Like, there's GameSpot, IGN, and Jeff Keighley are probably all trying to convince all of these companies to come under their umbrella and do their thing under them. So they have these companies saying, hey, Sony, we know you're doing something. Come work with us. Come be a part of our thing. You can help promote all these other events that were maybe happening the same day. And those conversations are ongoing. And since Sony hasn't announced anything official yet, they can change as much as they want. They could be a part of those conversations and things could change. So yeah, I mean, I think, the Xboxing Day thing I had on there as well, that changed a little bit too, but I think it's like them just like trying to find the best day of the week and trying to avoid other stuff. So things change for different reasons, but again, just trying to give people a better idea of what to expect, and not necessarily like I think people are worried about spoiling announcements, and that's not, I've kind of gone back and forth on this in my life where it's like, okay, you can't spoil reality. That's not a real thing. But I get why people get excited for these things, and how much is me saying, oh, some game is going to get announced going to enlighten anyone or give context to anything when the company is just going to actually make those announcements in a couple of weeks. It feels like what's my goal here is to inform people, and the thing that people really want is, when is this stuff happening? That's actually what they care about, because they want to be there and witness it. And so that's what I'm trying to fill in for people.
Yes, and that's the thing. One of the conversations we always see around Nintendo Directs is that I sometimes will tease an announcement that may be coming in a Direct in a vague way, but if people pay attention, they will understand what I am implying. And back in March, you put out the report saying, hey, a Direct is coming on this date in March. And it ended up being a mini Direct, which then causes some people to lose their minds because they don't consider that a Direct.
People,
because, branding and marketing.
Most people were very like, this is, you got it. So I felt pretty good about that, but yeah.
And then some people, like, even if you gave a hint as to a game in it, they get mad for that you spoiled a commercial.
Yeah.
And it's really, I'm like, you're trying to set an expectation for them of what is to come. This way they don't go into it and say, yeah, Direct on March 26th. And then a game they didn't want is in it, and then they get pissed off. And it's like, well, I'm just telling you when it is so you can expect it and enjoy it. That way, I mean, especially with a mini Direct or even Paper Mario, when Nintendo just drops them on Twitter, from a reporting perspective, it's hell, because we have no advanced knowledge of it happening. And all of a sudden it's, I woke up at 10 o'clock this morning. Well, Nintendo announced the game at 9. well, now I'm late to the game.
Yeah, that definitely happened with me with Paper Mario. Like, I don't have perfect information. Like, I don't know everything. So it's like, even like, Paper Mario gets dropped first thing in the morning, and I'm like, the first thing I see is I roll over in my bed and check Twitter and see someone saying, "Oh, here's the cover of the new Paper Mario game," and I'm rubbing my eyes like, "What the heck are you talking about?" Yeah, but it's So and then at that point, it's like, okay, I guess I'll just go cover this as a regular news story that I'm a little bit late to, and try to push it forward. And I guess in that story, that's where I put the Pikmin 3 Deluxe thing. So I'm like, oh, I'll add some extra context that most people know, I think. And then people were like, oh, that's breaking news too. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess most people don't know that. So it's like it's hard to keep track of everything, is what I'm finding out.
That one was actually funny to me because I saw the Pikmin 3 Deluxe spreading like wildfire last week after you put it in the story. I was kind of sitting like, I know I've said this.
Yeah, lots of people have.
We've definitely talked about it before on the show.
I'm like, yeah, why is it getting so much like attention right now? And I mean, I guess I'll lend the credit to you in that, since the mini Rex, people have taken your word for they're taking your word more like as a gospel now. So when they see you drop like a Pikmin 3 Deluxe in a story, they're like, yes, that's the confirmation that we needed.
Right. That is, I think that's exactly what happens. And it's like, oh yeah, okay. I guess I didn't realize that was happening to me, where I'm like, oh, now that I'm saying stuff, people are going to go run and write news stories. And that was happening with I was trying to reply to people on Twitter about the PlayStation thing early on, where I was saying, they were like, oh, I don't have good English, so what does slate of PlayStation mean? That sounds like it just means one game. And I was trying to explain, it should be a slate of games, a lot. And I was trying to define slate to the person, and really that's what I was trying to do. And then people were like, Jeff Grubb says there's going to be a ton of games there. It's going to there's a site that wrote Sony's going to embarrass Microsoft with their first event, and then I was the source for the story, and I'm like, oh my god, what is going on? So I'm like, okay, I need to maybe take a step back and be careful about what I'm tweeting now, which is that's new to me, and I'm learning how it works. And I think that was a mistake. I should not have been replying on Twitter so much, trying to clarify stuff. I'll just let the reporting speak for itself, and then let Sony make its announcements when it's going to. So
that's the funny thing with the insider culture, is that you could be replying the exact same way you have your entire career, but now that you have that extra set of eyes on you, everything you say is going to be dissected, and it's going to be thrown on Reddit, forums, Twitter, or the occasional YouTube channel, or just a random smaller website who's just thirsty for those hits, and they know, oh, Jeff said this about the PS5. Well, that's going to be a 50,000 view video now, even if it was really just, yeah, Sony's going to have some games.
Yeah,
that's not exactly a shocking revelation. Of course they're going to have games.
Yeah.
It's a PlayStation 5 event. What did you think they're going to have at it?
Yep.
With the June PS5 event, and I don't know, maybe I'm a little confused, but initially it was going to be significant, and now in the last kind of 24 hours, you're saying that it's going to be a little less larger than first anticipated. Some of the third-party games will probably not make the cut. Is that something that's happened just recently, and third parties have decided, or Sony has decided that third parties will no longer be a part of this show, maybe because they saw what was going on with the Series X?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
I would say that Sony's trying to put a show together. The response to the Series X thing might be a factor, and the reason I say that is because my understanding is Sony wants to make sure that they don't have any of those disclaimers that say this is running on a dev kit on a PC.
Yeah.
They want everything running on a PS5. So that might have pushed some stuff out. Now, how much stuff's getting pushed out? Again, I don't have perfect information. I am reporting on what I know, and then when I say stuff like it might not be as significant, that means that there are some things that were in it that are no longer in it. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean they're not replacing it with something else. I just don't know that for sure. Right. I can't confirm that. So I do think that the show should still be, I think it's going to be exciting. I don't think Sony's going to come out with their first thing. And right now, this is speculation. Sony's not going to come out with their first thing and and just completely blow it. It might not have every game that people are asking me about on Twitter, but I imagine that they're not gonna scam. Now it might be more of a hardware thing, and then some like sizzle reel video with not a ton of information about the games. I think that's entirely possible, and that the reason I say that is because I do know then they're doing an August state of play where they're putting together the big thing of next gen games and current gen games and saying here's what you could buy, here's all the details. That's when they're doing a lot of that stuff. So exactly what the structure of the June event's going to be, it's still difficult to say, but I think that I do think there will be plenty of stuff to get people excited.
Who do you think has the momentum going into next gen? Do you think Microsoft is still in the lead, or do you think Sony is going to take over? I was talking to my coworker Mike on our podcast, Games Beat Decides, about this, and I kind of had a revelation about myself when we were talking about this, and it's that I don't know if I ever quite bought into the idea that Microsoft completely has its shit together. This was the reaction to the last Microsoft event. People were expecting Microsoft to nail it because Microsoft's been nailing it, right? They've been doing everything right. They're being very transparent and open, and they're down to earth, and they're making Game Pass better and better every week. They get it, right? And for me, it was like, I do think that they are trying very hard, but I don't necessarily think that they are the company that has their fingers exactly on the pulse in the exact right spot all the time. And I say that like, I think a good example is the SAD edition of the Xbox. The Xbox S All Digital Edition, where people got very excited about the idea of this thing coming out and being $99, $150 at the most. It's going to be this huge like price war against Sony, and they're really just going to take it to them. And then the thing comes out and it's like $250, almost $300. I can't remember the exact price, but it was at a price that no one was like very excited anymore. It completely evaporated. Some people might have bought it, I don't know, but the people that were talking about it as this big move, it just all that went away because it wasn't. It was like this thing that Microsoft just sort of rolled out and it fizzled out because they didn't exactly present it in the way they should have. And then they weren't going to cut the price because that's just, they're not interested in competing on that level, I guess. Right. But like you would expect them to be the company that wants to compete on that level, right? And if they're not, why not? And I think my point here is that I don't necessarily think that Microsoft has its claws out and it's ready to go to battle in every single way with Sony in the way that some people think they are going to. That now, saying that, I still think they have the advantage, and just because Sony does seem like it might be in an aloof state right now in the way that it has been in the past. I also think like when you look at the people who are in charge now, it's not the people that really got the PlayStation 4 off the ground and the PlayStation and really like drove the image of the PlayStation 4 early on. Like you remember E3 2013 and Adam Boyes on stage and the whole executive team that was kind of running the show then and just nailing beat for beat everything so perfectly and kind of just running Microsoft into the ground. That I don't think that's the team that runs Sony right now. I think the team that runs Sony right now is a lot of the European staff that have just always succeeded because PlayStation's just always been more successful in Europe. And they're just used to winning, and I think that they are just expecting to win. Yeah. Now, this is speculation again, but I think that's where they're at. And with that mindset, I think Sony could screw up, and we could see some mess ups. And even if they do stuff successfully, I still think Microsoft's going to be over here building a lot of excitement for Game Pass. And people are going to be like, well, what do I need an Xbox for if I'm just going to play the games on the PC? And Microsoft's going to say, goody, goody. That's exactly what we want you to say. That's right. You're falling right into it. This is where we want you. And if all that stuff, works out, I think it's going to be a competitive generation. I would still give the edge to Microsoft, but I wouldn't say any side's running away with it for sure. If anyone's running away with it, it's Nintendo, I think. Very true.
Yeah, Microsoft is definitely in a unique situation than what we've seen in the past. Like the Xbox Series X, it's a Phil Spencer initiative. This isn't the Don Matrick of the Xbox One where he botched everything leading up to launch. And Microsoft isn't giving Sony, that advantage where Microsoft, every single bit of marketing they did with the Xbox One, they messed up. The whole used games bit, always online, they're not making those blunders at this time. So they, right there, they seemed more confident with the Xbox Series X. They seemed to be moving in the right direction, but their first significant fumble was with that Xbox Series X gameplay event earlier this month, where that could have it should have been a slam dunk for them. It should have been where they showed us awesome third-party games. Like, show us Assassin's Creed Valhalla running on the Xbox Series X with a significant 10-minute gameplay demo. Something similar to what we saw with the Unreal Engine 5 demonstration, but with an actual piece of software. That would have resonated with people. It would have showed us true next gen. A 90-second trailer of The Medium from the Blooper team. Yeah, it's an Xbox Series X exclusive, which they didn't even mention in the presentation. And you didn't show us any meaningful gameplay. The trailer was cool, but show us the game. They could have gone about that presentation in such a better way with just a few minutes of gameplay of some of those titles, still showing trailers of, things like Scorn and such. But had they actually gone out of their way and showed us Valhalla with a meaningful gameplay demonstration, we would have walked away from that event feeling, I guess, more confident and with a better idea of what next gen is going to introduce. Instead, we had to wait for the Unreal Engine 5 trailer to show us a meaningful glimpse of what next generation can deliver in terms of visual fidelity. And we're not going to see Unreal Engine 5 games for at least another 2 to 3 years. So we're still left kind of like, what are we actually going to see in 6 months from this new hardware in terms of visual fidelity, performance?
Yep.
Because we have a lot of cross-gen games.
Yeah. I mean, we've been through this dance before, though, I think, right? With the last generation where we went from 360 to Xbox One and PS3 to PS4. I think it's going to be very similar. And if anything, it's going to be a smoother transition. And when I say smoother, I mean it's going to be the games are going to look pretty close to one another from one generation to the next. It's going to take some time to build on the hardware and then the tools required to take advantage of the upcoming hardware. Now, I mean, and that's just because even when they're building games today, like they are building for low spec, like PCs still, like the 480 from 4 years ago, the RX 480 from AMD came out in 2016, and it still runs every game at 1080p 60 for the most part. And at that point, it's like, okay, we're just going to keep building for that because a lot of people own it, and let's just keep focusing on that. So it's going to take time to filter out this old hardware for consumers, and then they could start really thinking about like, okay, how do we take advantage of this hardware? Because now most people own upgraded machines, and we can really go to town on that. But until their spreadsheet says, okay, we can make that jump, it just doesn't make sense from a monetary standpoint, from a financial standpoint of actually the finances of building a game to try to make a game that just runs great on next gen. It doesn't make sense. It's too hard right now because the tools aren't there, and it's too expensive. And so, I think that Microsoft, it still made a mistake of the way it positioned that show. It should have known better. It should know what the word gameplay means. It's insane that it doesn't. It frustrated people, and it should have frustrated people. I think that people should feel kind of burned by that thing. But I still think like they are also in a tough position where that's just what next gen games look like for now.
What do you think Microsoft and Sony needs to do to sell next gen to the average person? Because for the tech enthusiasts like me, Nate, and yourself, we're going to get this stuff day one, but we're not the average person. We want the new hardware immediately, but the average person that has we'll say a Xbox One SAD or a Xbox One S or a VCR, which is what I have, what do you think Microsoft and Sony needs to do to get them onto the next generation?
It's tough. I mean, it is going to take the games eventually to move those people on. I think. I think that they want to build a compelling story from the beginning, though, and that does start with you said the three of us were going to get it day one. It does need to start with wowing us, and even when it comes to that, they have a pretty tough road to hoe here because. It's not going to show up on the screens immediately. Yeah, we're going to get a lot more 4K stuff, but games already. If we're playing on a TV from 10 feet away, games already look about as sharp as they're going to get in terms of resolution. People are going to get. There are going to be more games that run at a higher frame rate, but most people's TVs cap out at 60. So 120 frame rate racing game is still not going to show up even on a tech enthusiast TV. Probably not going to work there. So then where are the advantages? This is some pretty tough stuff to display. It's CPU, it's SSDs, it's stuff that where, okay, the loading is faster, but like, okay, loading's faster. That's very exciting. But it also enables games to just run faster because you're loading in assets faster, like the end of that Unreal 5 demo where she's flying through the world. That's possible because they can stream in these assets so fast without having to worry about, level of detail models popping up and looking really crappy. I just, it's still really tough to show. Like we have to explain why that lady flying through the game is really impressive from that perspective,
right.
And not like just like look at it like, oh yeah, shit, it's a lady flying through a world. That's cool. It looks nice, but I've seen people fly through worlds before. What's the difference? So it's gonna be tough. If they're gonna have to do better shows than what Microsoft did with the Xbox 2020 event. They're gonna have to talk about it, and they're gonna have to make people feel like they are smart. I think this is the key.
Yeah.
Make the people that are adopting early feel like, you know why you need this. Come on, this super fast SSD. Here's why. Let's go and explain it to you. But you already knew that. Now go tell all your friends and explain why this is so important. They can't miss out. And the truth is, it is really important. They can't miss out. The upgraded CPU alone is, to me, the most exciting part. And the SSD, very important. I know developers are very excited about that. But getting an SSD that has like modern processing capabilities, multiple cores, super fast gaming cores on their own, but then really good for hyper-threaded performance. That is going to lead to so many improvements in simulations and in AI, and it's going to feel like once we get to a point where they can really focus on these next-gen systems, we should see games leap forward in on the gameplay side in a way that maybe we didn't in this last generation because that crusty old CPU was holding us back for so long. So. Yeah, it's going to come down to having conversations with your enthusiasts and then letting them filter it out to all their fans. Go tell Direct Digital Foundry, let them explain it, and then let those people who watch Digital Foundry go tell all their friends. I think that's the key.
Microsoft seems to be doubling down on the Lockhart, the kind of the lower end. So it seems like they're covering both bases. We don't know prices yet, but I'm sure we will here in due course. But it seems like they're going after the enthusiast kind of high end with the Series X and kind of the average consumer with the Lockhart. We don't know if the Lockhart is still part of their plans in June. It could be, it may not be. But what about Sony? What do they have for the average person? Is it going to be the Don Matrick line of, well, you can just use the PS4 or PS4 Pro? I don't think so. But what do you think? There's a gap there in kind of the with consumer buying that potentially Sony has missed out on a piece of the market?
Yeah, this is another tough one, right? Because I think my experience applies to everyone where I wouldn't buy the lower end system. So who would? But I think that the numbers bear it out where like the PS4 still continued to outsell the PS4 Pro always. It was always, more units and even I think more dollar sales, at least in the United States, the MPD. So my experience is not universal. So I have to kind of extrapolate and think, okay, so then who is buying these systems? And it's like, okay, yeah, it's just a lot of people getting into the generation late who see that there are a lot of games that they can get for very cheap and they see their friends playing and they just want to play a way to do that. What does Sony say though? Do they say just go get a PS4 or PS4 Pro?
No,
that's a tough line, right?
Absolutely
I don't think
not.
they do.
Yeah, no, that's something that should never be repeated after Don Matrick, said that line. But I guess there's some. I don't really know what their message there is. It's basically just jump on board next gen. Maybe the price is more competitive than Microsoft. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and I think you're right. They can't say that, but I think they're not even really considering this. I think that, again, they're used to winning, and I think that they are expecting. It might be the other line: get a second job. I mean, they won't say that. They won't say that, but they might be thinking it, which is going to be pretty rough in the economy that we're dealing with right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a challenge both companies are going to face. Launching the hardware this year is the economic impacts that we're suffering from the pandemic. And if you're coming out and trying to launch a piece of hardware at, we'll say $500, I mean, they have to realistically be going into this saying, we're going to sell out of whatever we ship, which could be diminished due to some supply chain issues to begin with. So, but they know you're not gonna launch. You can't come out with 10 million pieces of hardware and expect to sell them out in November and December this year due to the economics. If you ship the typical numbers, 2 to 3 million, maybe 5 million before the end of the year, you'll likely sell out, but you may not see as many people who would adopt both systems as you may have typically seen in years past. Because now that could be $1,000 investment. And I mean, now you have to buy a game, I have to buy extra controllers, and all of a sudden, you're in for $1,500. That's probably not going to happen this time around. Once the economic situation improves, people are going back to work, people will come into it. And that's where Microsoft may have a slight advantage if Lockhart is significantly cheaper. Let's say, a $299 price point, plays the same games at a lower resolution, but $300 compared to $500, just from the psychological point of view, that's pretty impactful.
Especially if you think about the kinds of games that a lot of that audience will want to be playing. They want this as their way to play Fortnite. They want this as their way to continue playing Rainbow Six Siege with their friends or whatever. And those games are going to run fantastic on Lockhart. They're going to be great. You're not going to get much of a difference unless you have, again, one of those 4K 120 hertz screens with HDMI 2.1, which you don't if you're buying a Lockhart. So yeah, it's a really good position for them to be in.
And that's what the curious thing about these upcoming events for the summer. Like, we'll go into Sony's event in early June. What do you think Sony has to bring in June with the PS5 to really illustrate what they're bringing with their next generation hardware and software to sell people on it, especially in terms of software? Like, we've heard all bunch of rumors of what Sony could potentially bring to the show. I mean, we've heard the rumors that Insomniac is working on Spider-Man 2.
Sure, yeah.
We know Santa Monica is working on a new God of War game because, that's what they do. We've heard rumors of Blue Point making a game. So what do you think we see from Sony in terms of first-party software come the June event?
I'll just say I don't have any insight on this. Like, I don't know anything. So this is what I would say they should bring, and I think most people will agree we're probably going to see Horizon 2. That makes just too much sense for it not to happen. So I think that'll probably be their marquee thing. I think that'll be their big game that they have. I don't necessarily think they're going to do the here are games that are coming out in 2 to 3 years. They might, because they really want to sell the system. They need to get people excited. They might take that chance and do the thing that Sony's done in the past, where it's like, let's make promises that we're going to have to be stuck with for 5 or 6 years if these things get delayed. I don't know if they have the appetite for that anymore. I think that they are afraid of being in that situation. I don't think they enjoyed it with The Last Guardian and some of these other games, but they might. But so I would assume they're not going to. And in that case, they focus on Horizon. They show some third-party partner games. They might tease Spider-Man, because I wouldn't be surprised if that was a game coming up pretty, relatively soon, in the next, 18 months or something like that. But I don't think they go all out, and I don't think they're going to have. They probably won't have God of War 2. I don't think. They might, and prove me wrong. I'd be happy to see it. But I think they focus on one really big game, go big on Horizon, maybe tease these things in a small sizzle reel elsewhere, and then I imagine most of this June event is going to be here's why this hardware is important. Here's why this hardware is very cool. Here's how it works. Here's what it does for our games, and here's what those games look like and why it matters. And here's some developers talking about that a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the structure.
I would agree. I think Horizon probably will be there at launch, and the Blue Point game we keep hearing about will be a launch game, and it's just going to be the Assassin's Creeds and kind of the third party stuff to round out the launch window. But yeah, kind of the big heavy hitters, the God of Wars, the Spider-Mans, are probably going to be 2021, 2022.
Yeah, and they're going to have a roadmap, right? Because it's not all about this, and the people pay attention right now. The people really paying attention to this event are most of them. I don't know. I guess I don't know for sure, but I would say most of them are going to buy a PS5 no matter what. Those fans are already bought in. They are ready. That we saw this with the PS3 to PS4, where Sony didn't really believe in the PS4. They've said it themselves. They're like, we don't think this is going to be a success, and its success surprised us. And the reason it succeeded is because there's just a ton of people who are going to buy the next PlayStation, and they're excited for it. They're ready to go. And so they don't have to like, blow everything here. And they're going to want to save stuff for not just for like the run up to the launch later this year, but for the next year's, whatever they do when they don't go to E3 or whatever. And they're going to need those big games because they've learned over the years that they get judged really, really critically for their presentations because they're the company that set the bar in like 2014 and 2015 at E3 with, here's just a list of crazy games you can't believe are real. Final Fantasy VII Remake is really happening. And so they're going to want to save any game like that they have for when they really need it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is typically like what we saw during the PS4 generation before Sony introduced the State of Play initiative was that they really went all out at E3 or the PSX event. And now with them utilizing State of Play in a more meaningful way and skipping E3, now they have to draw out those announcements over the course of the year. Because we've seen the State of Play typically in the first quarter. Then we have one around when E3 typically is. And we see it towards the end of summer. And then we usually have PSX at the end of the year. So now if you're Sony and you have to plan for 4 events for these announcements, you can't just go into your E3 presentation, drop games that are coming out over the next 4 years. Because I think with the PS4, with Ghost of Tsushima being released this year, I think that game was announced back in 2017. So Sony hasn't actually announced a brand new first-party game for PS4 in 3 years because they promised us all these titles so long ago. And that would be a pretty bad idea if they came into their June event for the PS5 already promising us games out to 2023. And if we have to sit there and wait 3 years to see all these games finally see release, I would assume that the consumer has wised up and say, yeah, you're promising me the world, but it's going to take a long time for me to actually be given it. So maybe I'm not going to buy into the PS5 as early as I would have liked because, you showed me Kratos' face and you showed me a God of War 2 logo with no date. So obviously it's nothing coming out anytime soon, but you get the fan base hyped with such empty trailers like Nintendo. They showed a Metroid Prime 4 logo.
Yeah. And people went nuts.
Yeah, people went nuts like, yeah, it's the return of Metroid Prime.
I went nuts. I was excited. Yeah.
Now
it got me.
Later, we're still waiting for something.
Yep.
But I mean, I do expect Sony to put on a really strong show in June because Sony's marketing and presentation style is always impactful. They know what consumers want to see. They know how they need to communicate with them, whether it's with a gameplay demo of something like Horizon Zero Dawn and showing the seamless world, thanks to SSD and such. That's where Sony always capitalizes, and that's usually where Microsoft stumbles. But I mean, I still think Microsoft is going to come in, pretty heavy in July with their event, where they're finally going to showcase their first-party efforts and some third-party.
What do you think is going to be there? Do you think they're going to try to really match Sony's sort of loss-leading games? Which I say that because I still think even as successful as those games are, I think they have a hard time like making their budgets back. Do you think Microsoft's going to have the stomach for that?
Yes, I think this time around they know they have to. They don't really have a choice.
It does feel different this time around, but I kind of am questioning the same things. I mean, there's no question that the hardware is top quality and it's going to be fantastic. I'd still question the game side, but we'll see.
I mean, if we entertain the rumors that are publicly known of the new Fable, Perfect Dark, that's not a bad... I mean, it's a small catalog of games, but that's already more ambitious than Microsoft was during the entire Xbox One generation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Relative to Xbox One, it's going to be much more. They're going to look much more bigger budget. I think you're right. Definitely. Yeah. For me, when I think of Microsoft right now, it's all Game Pass.
Yeah.
And does Game Pass necessarily need those levels, less level of games? Now, I talked to some people from the Xbox Game Pass on a show not too long ago, and they were like, we know that we need both. The customer's asking for both. So that, yeah, we're going to go for it. Yeah, we're going to do Gears Tactics. Absolutely. But we're also going to do the giant games. That's what people are asking for. They're saying that's what they're saying. But I don't know if necessarily if their idea of, quadruple A biggest budget game is the same as Sony's. And, I would be even a little bit surprised because people are going to subscribe to Game Pass because there's a lot of content, a bunch of pretty good content, a few games that they love. And then just so many games that they haven't even tried. They don't even know if they like them or not or yet. And I don't necessarily know if a giant God of War style game that you play through and finish and don't really play again is the kind of thing that keeps people subscribed to Game Pass. But I guess they need to find out for themselves, right? Does anyone know if that's what works? If they do that and it does lead to a huge bump, they'll prove the theory and there it is. They just haven't tried it yet. I just don't know. It's one of those weird things where it's like, I don't know how that plays out.
So what about Nintendo? So you recently said that directs are probably not going to happen, but we don't know, right? I mean, that's kind of your speculation that, directs are kind of off the table maybe till later this year.
Okay. Yeah. Let's clear this up. Yep. So they don't have a direct in the works right now. That I know. That's what they're telling partners, is that we don't have anything in the works right now. A few weeks ago, what they said is maybe September to these partners. When they're trying to explain, like, hey, if you have a game that you want to get in there, maybe by September, but maybe you should just do it by yourself, is what they were saying. Now, the update from Nintendo is, we just don't have one in the works right now, and that's not going to change in the foreseeable future. So again, this is what I know that they're saying. Now, so the speculation part, I don't know. I don't even know if any of that is really speculation. Now, right. Could things change? Absolutely. They could change if, Japan suddenly goes back to work and Nintendo's like, you know what, we got a bug. We in our, bug in our britches, and we want to get out there and actually put something out there and get everyone excited about a direct. They could maybe throw one together pretty quickly. But you guys know that these things are a lot of work, and Nintendo especially is hesitant about doing anything over video. They want to be in person. They think it's disrespectful to do anything in any other way. So when people are on Twitter asking me, why can't Nintendo of America or Nintendo of Europe do this if it's so hard for Nintendo in Japan? And it's because Nintendo of Japan, like, it doesn't matter how easy or how hard it is. It's still culturally against the way they want to do things. And then on top of that, also, it is technically hard for NCL to actually pull this stuff off. So right now, they're just, like you said, off the table, and that probably won't change until they go back to work. And that doesn't mean they're off. They're not dead.
Dead. Absolutely. I guess my question is, do you think Nintendo is a little concerned that they may lose a little bit of traction given next gen is just coming around the corner here? And, they still have the Pikmins, and they have the Paper Marios and the Clubhouse games and potentially some other titles that will be announced.
Deadly Premonition 2.
Deadly Premonition 2. Do you think they're still kind of on course for a good rest of the year, or do you think they need to drop a couple of big titles?
I think that Nintendo is probably they're worried about falling behind a little bit here. I think that you're right. They're worried about losing ground. That's what they're telling investors, that they're concerned about some of this stuff, the results of COVID-19. And how they fight back, or how do they make sure that they are staying in the conversation and keeping people excited, is with game announcements, like you said. I don't know if this year was ever intended, though, to be this. That's not true. I'm sure that they had plans for, like, Zelda probably to be out by now. Maybe, a few years ago they were probably thinking, Metroid Prime 4 could easily come out by now. That stuff's not ready. And so this year, very early on, within January, February, it shifted to, okay, so we have Mario's 35th anniversary. We are working on those remasters of the 3D Mario games. We have a couple other Wii U games we could bring over, like Pikmin 3, and we got Paper Mario coming from Intelligent Systems, who's been working on this instead of like putting all their people on Fire Emblem. So what else is there? I would tell people to, like, set expectations at what I just said. Expect those games, and if there's something else coming, it'll be a really pleasant surprise. Just don't expect it. And then does that lead to what you said, with them losing ground? Maybe, possibly. I still think that there's a lot of people out there who, if the Switch got a $50 price cut, like, there's a lot of people who are going to jump on and be like, look at all these awesome games that have already come out for this thing, and that's awesome. Does that, like, do anything for the antsy fans who are the one person in your life that's like doesn't like Animal Crossing, who hasn't been playing that nonstop, and it's been like, there's nothing coming out for the Switch for months now. Does any of this do anything to quell their concerns? I don't know. Maybe that Paper Mario game is fantastic, and it's Game of the Year material, and then people will be like, okay, I'm satiated. But there's a good chance it's not that. So. Yeah, I think it's gonna be tough for Nintendo, but I think it was gonna be tough even if they did have big stuff, because the next gen consoles are gonna loom so large even without games. Even those consoles launch, they don't have anything really spectacular. We'll see what Halo Infinite is like, but they're not gonna have a lot of games. I think even when those come out and aren't like the greatest things for awesome new games, people are still gonna be talking about those nonstop. So it was gonna be hard for Nintendo no matter what.
Yeah, 2020. What 2020 is becoming is not what Nintendo set out for this year to be for them in terms of software releases. I do know that there have been some intended 2020 games that have been delayed due to the impacts of COVID-19. So these games have been pushed to 2021. And some of the games releasing, like Paper Mario, was originally slated to release earlier in the year. They had hoped to release it in June or even late May. And as we see, it's being released in July. Now, that's not a significant delay, but it was enough that Nintendo had to make a marketing decision of when are we going to announce this game? And that's why it was just a random Twitter drop because people continually brought up, why wasn't it in the mini direct? Well, it wasn't in the mini direct because at that time, Nintendo did not know when they could actually launch this title, because Nintendo's games, they are selling well digitally. Nintendo's getting around 15 to 20% digital rate on some games. Some games well above that, 30. Animal Crossing, I believe, is like a 50% digital attach ratio. But we also have to look at the release timing of that game and when the pandemic hit and retailers and such were being shut down.
I'd say that a good number for average for them is 25 to 30% digital. Yeah.
So if I'm Nintendo and I'm releasing Paper Mario, I have to look at a lot of logistical, measures and really come to the decision of, can I release this game in July if retailers in America and Europe are shut down? Because I'm basically giving up a significant chunk of where my sales come from. Yes, people might say, well, the store's not open, or Amazon stock is limited. It's going to take a while to be, get it shipped to me. Like, I got Final Fantasy VII Remake off Amazon, and it took a few extra days because of everything happening. So Nintendo has to weigh that decision when it came to announcing a game like Paper Mario. And obviously they looked at enough internal data to suggest that July was a good time that they could launch the game. Now, that type of decision is going to impact the rollout of games like the Pikmin 3 Deluxe, 3D World, the Mario 3D Collection, and so forth for the remainder of the year. So by Nintendo basically took some of their first half games and said, we're releasing them now in the second half because the games we intended or hoped to have in the second half are no longer there, and we have to fill out our release schedule.
Yeah, I mean, Pikmin 3 absolutely should have been announced a long time ago, before Paper Mario. That was the original idea. I mean, all this stuff, I think, you said it wasn't in the mini direct because they didn't know. But it was originally planned to be in that direct, and it was going to be a full direct. That those games were absolutely going to be a part of that. And you look at the timing, like Deadly Premonition 2, almost like it probably could have fit in there as well. But they just weren't sure, and so they just like, let's pull back on the stuff that we're in control of. We have relationships with our partners. We have to do something. Just make it a mini direct, deliver what we're supposed to deliver to the people we have relationships with, and then we'll figure the rest out later. And now we're seeing them figure it out. And and I think the Paper Mario trailer went really well, right? Like that did very well. So I think they're going to probably continue that strategy going forward. And it should be, we should see some new stuff from them. We should see some announcements. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's like, let's just really go all out on Mario, get people excited about Mario, and then see how that does. And if that catches on, maybe that is our fall, and we can rely on that. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, they can kind of live off probably the nostalgia value of Galaxy Mario 64 with the 3D Mario collection, especially if they brand it as Mario All-Stars 2.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for us, we're in our 30s or older, and we all remember Super Mario All-Stars on the Super NES. It was, it was that magical collection with almost like the original remakes or remasters of NES classics. We got that new coat of paint and visual flair for those games. And we played them, and it was amazing. Now, if we can get that again on the Switch, that's going to be appealing to even people who don't own a Switch right now, because you remember you played Mario 64.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's about building that library to make people who don't already own a Switch feel really good. And then when you release a revised Switch at some point in the next, 12 to 18 months, that's like, again, like you're just going to get a bunch of people selling their Switches to secondhand. And now all those people are like, oh, look at all these awesome games that I could buy on this used Switch that I just bought for pretty cheap. It's like, it's the strategy that has worked for Nintendo over and over in handhelds, and they're just going to keep going forward with that. Now, I hope there's a big game. We know Zelda and Metroid Prime are coming at some point. Is there anything else? Who knows if they're going to want to talk about those before they get these other games that they already have on their plate out of the way. But yeah, so that they might be in that situation where there is other stuff, but do they want to put another announced game that is going to be in development limbo for a very long time out in the public when they could just like say, well, let's get them excited about Zelda again, which I would be fine with. Get me excited about Zelda.
I mean, I do expect that we'll see a Breath of the Wild 2 trailer in 2020. I do think.
Yeah.
Because I think that was probably going to be a focus for Nintendo at their E3. Even I don't believe the game was making a 2020 release, but they still would have primed it for a focus at their E3 showing. Because even if they intended to release it in early 2021, what better place to make it that highlight game than E3? Now, with that not happening and everything now in disarray, Nintendo has reshuffled their entire lineup. And it kind of brings us to the curious question of, we know ARMS DLC is coming to Smash Brothers with the intended release of June. We know Pokemon's first expansion pack is supposed to release in June, and as far as we know, Nintendo has not relayed any information to suggest that either one of those have been delayed or faced any impacts due to work from home. So in the next couple of weeks, we should either hear or see those release. And Nintendo hasn't communicated anything about those. And as we talked about 3-4 games that we do anticipate Nintendo to release this year. And if they have no directs on the horizon, how do you think Nintendo is going to communicate with fans these announcements? Do you really think we're just going to see what they saw with Paper Mario and they're just going to go to Twitter a 9 o'clock in the morning random drop of here's 3D collection? Or
they might, just because they avoid the problem of building up a lot of excitement, right? A lot of anticipation, where they're like, oh, we'll have the Switch thing tomorrow. And then that gives people time to speculate if there's going to be anything else. And here's all the rumors. And here's all the false rumors that are just here to get people riled up for no good reason. If they just drop it, they don't have to worry about any of that. There's no worries about expectations. It's just, here's what it is. And you either like it or you don't. And then people can, they'll move on to something else. And again, Paper Mario proved that a lot of people were just fine with that. It got a ton of hits on YouTube. And it got a lot of traction on Twitter. And it works, especially considering they're hesitant about doing any other sort of thing, any sort of presentation. Now, that said, Sakurai does stuff from his office all the time. There's no reason he can't do a video presentation from his home, except, and again, like Nintendo might feel more comfortable about that because Sakurai is in charge of this. So they don't necessarily need to worry about about being disrespectful to him, because they've already done all the respects with him or whatever for putting him in charge of it. And he could just do it how he wants. So maybe they might come up with something. But I wouldn't be surprised if they just do the drop out of nowhere, just to get it out of the way and just let it build its own momentum based on its own strengths.
I have one more question for Jeff. Sorry, no, go ahead.
Say, if you're on timing, since Nintendo has, I'd say they fleshed out their releases up to July. So aside from the ARMS and Pokemon DLC, which should be coming next month, when do you think Nintendo will talk about August and September releases? Especially, we've kind of grew accustomed to Nintendo having a direct or a mini direct or an indies direct around Tokyo Game Show or Gamescom. And now if those don't fall into place, you still think they kind of try to time their announcements in those weeks of like August and early September to then talk about their October, November, December games? Or you really think it's just it's a free for all now. They can come out today at 9 p.m. and just say, it's 3D collection coming out in August.
I don't know if they're going to try to change up like the way that they traditionally do timing. I know a lot of people, when they look at like when they're trying to figure out when the next Nintendo thing is going to be, they go back in time and they look at how Nintendo has timed out everything beforehand, and they're like trying to apply these patterns that may or may not exist, like in the conscious minds of the people setting up these calendars in the first place. So we try to apply a lot of stuff that like might just be, oh, that was just the result of the way things work, and there is actually no method to this madness. But that said, I still think that you are generally right in that they will want to wait a little bit to the end of summer before having to make any decisions on how to do any of this stuff. The Paper Mario's coming out when it's coming out, and so they had to do something. So they figured out something. And until I think they feel some more of that pressure for some of these other games, and we'll see what they do for like you said, for the DLC for Smash Brothers. We'll see what they figure out for that. They're going to have to figure something out. But for these other games where they don't necessarily have to move until they're comfortable, we probably won't see them until a little bit later when they're like, okay, these games are coming out in a couple of months now. We really do have to do something. So let's figure out what that is. What are our options now that we've waited? Do we have any ways of doing things that are bigger or more exciting? Have we figured those processes out now that we've given ourselves time? So yeah, I wouldn't expect anything in the next couple of weeks unless it's for a game that's coming out relatively soon. If they maybe for Pikmin 3 Deluxe, if they feel like, okay, we can get that out. But again, they might just want to wait on that until they need a game, if they need to fill in the schedule at some point. So we'll see.
It does feel like Nintendo will probably go back to that type of planning of the game's coming out in 6 to 8 weeks. That's how much lead time we're going to give it. And so, I mean, basically, if people are hoping to hear of the August or the September release, we're probably going to have to wait until the second half of June, maybe even the first week of July before we see Nintendo announce plans for the second half of summer and early fall.
For the audience out there that is listening, maybe some folks thinking about becoming journalists in the industry, what advice would you give them for those people that are thinking about entering journalism in video games?
It's rough out there, especially right now with the media landscape being decimated by COVID. But I don't want to discourage anyone, and I would say, I talked about like over extrapolating from my own personal experiences, but I'll say what worked for me. You do want to be the person that says yes if you're working a job that kind of sucks in media and they keep just throwing work at you, for a while you do have to just be the person who says yes. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll take on this extra work, and it's a bummer. It is a lot of extra work, but eventually, when they need something, they're going to think of you first, and they're going to come to you first. Now, how do you get to that point? How do you get to the point where you even have like that job in the first place? Again, it's tough, but you want to build a personality. You want to be recognizable to the people that are in those positions. Don't be pushy, but like find out what they're interested in and become a part of that community. I think the reason I ended up in this job is I grew up reading like EGM and 1UP and Game Players magazine, and as much as I enjoyed the content and I enjoyed games, I love games, but a big part of me just like wanted to be among the people who were writing about games. I wanted to be friends with them. I wanted to be in that community, that clique. And when you think about it that way, you think about the people in that space as people and like what they're like and what they like and what do they need? What would help them do their job? And for me, it was, I wrote on 1UP, my blog for years and years. And then when I tried to make it for real, I went to Combo and worked for a little bit at combo.com, that Nate knows about. And I was about ready to give up at my time with Combo was winding down. The site sort of imploded. I didn't even really understand what was going on at the time. I was like, I'm just writing about games, and I was doing okay. But when it imploded, I was working at like a Kroger warehouse, picking stock off the shelves to send to stores, and listening to podcasts nonstop. But I was like, that was my day job, and I wasn't really making money from writing about games. And I had given up, and I was about to like, okay, I'm just going to have to figure out what my real career is going to be. But I lucked out in that over the years, I had built relationships with people who are in these communities who are also coming up alongside me. And one of those people happened to get a job not even a job really. He was volunteering, helping out with Bitmob, helping Dan Shu, who was the former editor of EGM. He was helping him put together this site after Shu left EGM. And he came to me. He's like, "Hey, Jeff, do you I saw you write news for Combo, and I know you haven't done it recently, but we're putting together. We want someone to write some news. Do you want to just come do that for us a few times a week?" I'm like, wow, okay, this kind of came out of nowhere, but it built up out of my relationships with people, and that people say it's networking, it's all about who you know, and it's absolutely true. But it doesn't have to be a negative in that way. The secret there is just want to know the people. If you want to know the people, then you'll know the people. And it really worked out for me. A lot of it was luck. But then, over time, I got close with Shu. And then when Shu went and got his job at VentureBeat, he was working there and he needed someone to cover a story. And I just volunteered for it right away and covered it. And it worked, basically the rest has been history. And it's been a good job and I've been really happy with it. But, it takes a lot of all these things working in concert with one another, where you want to know the people, you want to be the person who says yes, and then you just want to think about, put yourself in the other person's shoes who is making the decisions about who to give money and who to give jobs. And if you come at it from that perspective, you're going to be the person that they think of. And when they have a job to offer you, there's a good chance you're going to be the one to get it. So that would be my general long-winded answer to how that works for sure.
Well said.
That's good advice.
Takes time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It definitely does take time.
Yep.
That will conclude today's episode of Nate the Hate. I would like to thank Jeffrey Grubb for joining us today. It was an honor having you.
Thanks, man. I really had a good time. This was a really fun show.
Oh, thank you for joining us. I mean, it was definitely a insightful and fun topic to talk about. And as always, thank you, MVG, for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. And Jeff, we'll probably get you back on after August or something and just review the summer and see how you did.
Let's wrap it up. Yeah, we'll kind of talk about how everything went and see what our thoughts are at that point. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, we'll definitely make that happen. And I will have Jeff's Twitter in the video description below, along with a link to VentureBeat. And as always, MVG's channel is linked in the description as well. And until next time, continue to embrace the hate.